Roar Nation, Promise Keepers is back. July 31st, 2020. Estimated 80,000 men will be gathering at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Speakers are going to rock the house. It's going to be a full lineup, and on top of that, worship is going to be amazing. Why am I telling you so far in advance? Because tickets are on sale and they're slowly selling out. So, that being said, I hope I see you there. I am planning on going. Go to promisekeepers.org to get info and tickets. Again, go to promisekeepers.org. See you there.
Welcome to Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You, the podcast that focuses on Christians that are active in everyday life. Join in as we speak to everyone from successful business owners to educators to athletes about their faith and how it helps them reach out and revolutionize those around them to do the same. And now get ready to roar with your host, the voice of manifestation, John Fuller.
Hey, Roar Nation, John Fuller here, and we are excited today because this is going to be fun. So check this out. I am talking to the best guy to see on the worst day of your life. That's what he's been tagged as. He got some other things that we're going to talk about for fun. But that being said, I want to introduce you to Dr. Charles Chuck Page. Chuck, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm great, John. Good to be on the show.
That's good. Hey, I don't know if I should read this off or not, but I'm dying laughing on your suggested introduction. What you got nicknamed in college? So the awards that you got?
Yeah, well, so one of my awards, I don't know which, I can't remember, high school, college, but one of my awards was most likely to marry a Denny's waitress. So in medical school, I skipped class and I would just go to Denny's and just buy a Grand Slam and just study all day. So that's what the award I got after we finished our basic sciences. So yeah, I got some weird. Yeah, in high school, I got an award for. I got second place for ugliest man on campus. It's just. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I guess I'm the Charlie Brown, and then I got most likely to get sued for malpractice. And let's don't even talk about that one today.
I would say you guys can keep that one, man. I'd say you can have that one back. I ain't taking it. All right, so that was funny. I read that on your bio sheet, man, and I about fell over laughing. So that made it so for fun. Okay, so Chuck, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and some of your background?
So I am a small town surgeon. I do everything. I carry a lot of different hats. I've been doing this for about 25 years. So, the older I get, the more boring I like things to be, but it always seems like I always get the crazy stuff, especially, I know you're out in Amarillo, but in East Texas, man, the thicker the trees get, man, the crazier stuff the farther you get in the trees. So that's kind of one hat that I wear. I'm a deacon in my church. I'm busy with my church. I'm married. I've got 5 kids.
Wow.
And 2 are in college. So I can't quit my day job, but I sure would like to.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I got two in college, and I got one going to college. So we just got all kinds of moving parts. I tell people I'm the best guy to see on the worst day of your life, but my wife is the best person to see any day of your life. She's awesome.
We've
been married about 25 years, and she puts up with me, and I don't deserve her, that's for sure.
25 years of marriage. Congratulations. Hey, I'm curious. This is going to be a side note. What I watch like crazy things that happen in the ER sometimes.
Yep.
I get a kick out of it. What's your craziest walk-in that stands out to you?
Oh my goodness. I can't even remember. I mean, there was a guy that came in with a tattoo on his chest that said, ready for heaven. And he was ready for heaven. I mean, literally. I mean, just crazy things. Yeah. The ER is crazy. I see stuff that would make Dr. Pimple Popper probably pass out, So, yes, sir.
That is hilarious. Okay. So along your journey of school, maybe school or life just recently, it doesn't matter, but do you have kind of like a life scripture or mantra quote that you've kind of just stuck with that you're grounded on?
Well, I think, there's so many, but probably, Ephesians 2:10, for we are his workmanship created in good works for Christ Jesus. I can't even quote it now. For we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works to walk in those things which he's prepared for us to do. I love that verse, So yeah, it's Ephesians 2:10.
I decided I'm going to steal that. Now I got a bunch of books I got to sign myself, and I'm going to steal your Ephesians 2:10. I like that. Created for good works.
Yes, our poema. The Greek says poema. It's like we're like something that God's writing down the story. Man, and I got some stories to tell you, as we all do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. Okay. So, Chuck, why don't you take me a little bit on your journey of why you because we're a lot about stepping into purpose, our calling, what we're called to do. Why or when did you decide to become a doctor? Kind of what was some of that process of maybe from high school, college, going forward?
So, for me, I never opened a book in high school. I was a football player, and something clicked. I became a Christian about age 16, my junior year in high school.
Okay.
And things began to change. And, one of the biggest role models growing up in small town Texas was my family doctor. And, God just began to work in my heart. My mom and dad never went to college. And so this was a completely different journey. My dad was a landscaper. We grew trees, we landscaped houses, anything that was hard work. My dad somehow found a way to get me involved in it. So, yard mowing, that kind of stuff. So I figured I wanted an inside job. But anyway, I just began to take that, that step, and I went to a small liberal arts school in Sherman, which was really formative, and failed my first set of exams. Didn't know what I was doing, but God was faithful the whole way, and it's been a journey. And I kind of always thought I'd be a small town doctor, and since I am a small town doctor, small town surgeon, so it's unique, and then I get to know my patients a little bit better than most urban surgeons because I see them for a lot of different things. So it's kind of gratifying.
So at what point did you decide that you thought, was it because of your role model that you thought you'd become a doctor, or did you just kind of step into it? You thought you'd give it a stab at it?
Well, it's a calling. Definitely. And that's kind of what's kept me going. As medicine is crazy these days. I tell people I feel like we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Oh, gosh.
The way all the regulations and stuff. And, I tell you, and medicine's becoming more of a shift work type mentality. And the things that we kind of valued as physicians of the last generation, at least. I'm becoming a dinosaur, by the way. I'm 50, So, but the things we valued, ownership of patients, this is my patient, this is my responsibility, continuity of care, all those kind of things are just kind of gone with the wind now. And so it's a whole different kind of
why is that leaving? To me, that's really sad, because when I think about that, I want to see the same doctor. I want to feel like I'm valued by my doctor for the sense of that. So why is that going away?
A lot of it is because of, the Affordable Care Act and a lot of the new regulations that we have. A doctor, for example, primary care doctors, they can't see you in the office and go to the hospital and jump through all the hoops they have to jump through, to see you. So you see somebody that you don't know in the hospital, and, you're not really cared for by a doctor in the hospital. You're cared for by a system. So every day you see a new doctor. So there's a lot of this is the way I feel. I feel like a quarterback in a football game. In every play, I have a new guy on the team. So I have a new running back to hand off the ball to. I got a new center to take the snap from. They may be the best running back. Emmitt Smith may be taking the ball.
Right.
But it's just there's no continuity of care anymore, and it's frustrating, especially when you're the surgeon trying to, get people from point A to point B. So, it's a big challenge. But, once again, it's still a calling, and, I still love what I do. I love my patients, and my patients inspire me, and that's kind of why kind of motivated me to start doing some writing. Part of it was just to process all these things that happened in my life, but it's also just because I've realized just the power of stories, and I've learned so much from people, and I've kind of, as I've gotten a little older and more, I guess maybe a little bit wiser, I've learned to listen to people, and listen to my patients, and they've got a lot of stuff they can teach you when you listen to folks.
Well, that's a great segue. I'm glad you brought that up. So, author, you've written a book called A Spoonful of Courage, and it says for the sick and suffering. So I want to talk about that. I want to hear about that, because obviously that's to pick up that book. That's a very niche market. It's not like it's a self-help type book. I'm sick. There's a reason people are picking that up. What spurred you on to write this book?
Well, first of all, about 3 years ago, my office building burned down. So, I'm a solo surgeon, and I pretty much work 24/7. And, a lot of my retirement was in that building. And as I watched my building kind of burn up in flames, it was just like, wow, this is the worst time that could ever happen. And, I was underinsured on the property. And so it was just a whole mess. But what was interesting and what inspired me is kind of word spread in our town. People began to tell me their stories. I mean, I was still on call the weekend my office building burned down. So I still had to take care of patients. And, one guy said, "Hey, Doc, you're not going to believe this, but my house burned down. And my wife, who was invalid, she couldn't walk, was left inside. I couldn't get her out. So I had to watch my house burn down with my wife inside." And as I was throwing my pity party, I realized that I had nothing to complain about. And so often when we see what other people are going through, we begin to adjust our attitude. And so that's what these stories are about. They're about to change your focus. And so what I learned is, first of all, is the power of people's stories. What encouraged me the most was not the pat on the back. Hey, all things work for good for those who love the Lord. And, yes, those scriptures are true, but what really inspired me and motivated me to keep going was the stories of other people. And that's one of the great things about being in healthcare is that, when we go to work, no matter what kind of problems we're having, and I've got a ton of problems, it seems like every day, when I hear the stories of these people and I see what they're going through, I realize, man, I have nothing to complain about. Yeah. I think that just kind of keeps me motivated and keeps me going. I had a lady about 3 weeks ago, came in the emergency room. You're talking about your worst emergency room story. She had ovarian cancer for 16 years, and she was trying. I mean, no more chemotherapeutic options. I mean, the big city cancer doctors, they're done with her. And she comes in, she's had this bulge growing in her abdomen, and it exploded, and all of her bowel contents just leaked out onto, her belly. I mean, just the most horrific thing you can imagine. And, and I'm like, oh my goodness, let's go ship you to the big city. And sure enough, she wanted to stay, and they wouldn't take her. And, she said a couple things she said that just really blew me away. She said, "Doctor, I play the cards play the hand of cards that God gives me." And I was like, wow, because she had been given some bad cards.
Yeah.
And the other thing she said is, she said, if I can just reach one person through my sickness, it's been worth it. And I'll tell you, John, I don't have that kind of faith. What I'm saying? I don't have that kind of endurance. And of course, I never went through that. And I'm a firm believer that as we go through things like that, God measures out the grace we need to go through the circumstances that we're facing. But man, that just encourages me. And that's just a faith that, these are just everyday people sharing their stories. And, and I just felt like these stories needed to be shared with folks. So it's kind of, the book is very similar to a chicken soup for the soul, but it's really faith-based. And they're really stories that kind of help people change their focus. I don't know about how you deal with your problems and challenges in life, but I tend to, all the why me, why me, why now, why God, why not somebody else? Why can't somebody else deal with this problem? And these stories help us change focus, from an inward focus to more of an upward focus, looking at God and his promises and, all the things, that he's promised us in a crisis or in any kind of obstacle or challenge.
That's really good. One of the best advice I ever got, I was going through a kind of like a hearing God's voice for your life class. And the guy said, the worst question you could ever ask God is why. He said, what you need to be asking is, God, what do you want to show me through this situation? And when he said that, man, I thought, man, that's really good, because the fact is that what's already is done is done. Now it's more like, God, what can we do this? Like, what are you wanting? How can you be glorified in this situation? How can you fix it? And what can I do to be part of that situation or circumstance? And I think a lot of times for years, I was that victim growing up and like, why this and why that? And man, once he said that, it literally, like you said, your book, you change your focus. It radically changed my life because all of a sudden I felt empowered by the Holy Spirit and by my Heavenly Father to say, hey, something can be done about this. I'm not a victim. This can be fixed.
Wow. Yeah. And that's well said. That's exactly that upward focus. So often we see our problems, but we don't see the possibilities that our problems bring, and suffering, whatever kind of suffering it is, it's an invitation, for intimacy with God, to know God better. It's an opportunity to grow and change and mature. It talks about that in Romans, about, in James, how we should count it all joy, knowing that all these things are going to be produced in our lives. It's an opportunity to influence people. And
yes.
It's funny. I see this all the time, just like this lady with cancer. Man, she, just in her suffering and in her attitude that she had with her suffering, man, she was able to just really inspire people. And people would listen to her that, I could never influence, even as a doctor or whatever, but just the fact that just the way she responded to her circumstances was just, man, it just caught people's attention.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how many stories did you end up with in the book? Did you end up interviewing a lot of people like in town and your patients and stuff?
Well, a lot of these are my patients. I've changed a lot of the names and some of the scenarios a little bit for confidentiality purposes. But they're real stories about real people. Yeah. So, they're real.
Tell me one of your favorites or one that sticks out to you besides the lady with cancer you told us about.
Well, there was a girl that came into the emergency room. I seem like I'm giving you all the sad stories.
Well, the book is about sick and suffering, so I wasn't expecting any comical joy out of any of these. So.
Well, there are some funny stories in there. So
okay.
Anyway, let me tell you something. So there was an old rancher that he came into the hospital, and he's kind of this guy, didn't like doctors, and so this old rancher was out feeding his cows, and he had this old fence that was about broken down. So he took this electric wire and put it around his corral, and he got out there, and as he was putting out feed, he fell and he hit the electrical wire, and it shocked him, and
right.
And all of a sudden the guy realized he was just feeling better and feeling stronger. He got up and wiped the dust off his britches, and so went back and. 4 or 5 days later, began feeling kind of sick and went back out to his corral and
oh my gosh,
started feeding again, and once again fell and hit that wire, and man, it gave him a jolt, and he kind of something, I guess a light bulb went on in his head, no pun intended, but he said, man, this is pretty good. So he took the wire and he ran it through his house. And so every morning he would get up and he would drink his coffee and he'd touch that wire,
Oh my God.
Anyway, later, I got kind of a consult in this, but later he came to the hospital and he was in atrial, fibrillation. He was, it was actually what the guy was doing cardioversions. When he touched that wire, it would shock his heart and put it back in rhythm. And, he almost killed himself. The point is, we need to be.
I'm just dying laughing, man, because I'm in a small ag town.
Yeah.
And I'm around guys like that all the time. So I'm picturing guys that I know that would do that. It's just comical, man.
We guys tend to be the worst physicians. Just the point of, sometimes we can get ourselves in some big trouble when we don't go to the great physician, that God has the answers. And often we don't look for the answers in the right place. And hey, I'm a doctor. I try to treat myself too. I'm getting worse. I'm one of those do as I say, not as I do doctors. But a sad story, once we had this girl come in an ATV accident. She was fixing to go to medical school. Beautiful girl, bashed her head in and had a closed head injury. Basically was in a coma, and it was just obvious she was going to die. Nothing the neurosurgeon could do. And so the family gathered around and kind of began, how do you tell a family news like that?
Yeah.
In one instant, they've got this successful, beautiful daughter, and now it's all gone. And so, I kind of stumbled and did my best telling them what was going to happen. And the family gathered around the bedside there in the emergency room to pray. And I was kind of busy, trying to get all my paperwork done and go to the next trauma patient that evening. It was kind of a busy evening. And they were in there praying, and, one of the alarms went off. I went back in the room, and Grandma saw me out of the corner of her eye, and she asked, "Hey, Doc, would you come pray with us?" And to be honest, John, I was a little reluctant to do that.
Yeah.
Just kind of weird situation, but nevertheless, I joined hands and listened to him pray, and Grandma began praying, "Thank you, God, she's perfect. God, I thank you that she's perfect." As her vitals were going down, and she's circling the drain. And I kind of opened one eye and looked at the girl, and, her head was bashed in, blood coming out everywhere, clear fluid, covered in glass and dirt. And I'm like, what do you mean she's perfect? In my eyes, what I was seeing was far from perfect. And, those words, that girl went on to be with the Lord. But, those Grandma's words stuck in my head, she's perfect. Grandma was seeing the unseen. She was seeing something that went beyond, what we see here in the here and now, and really that's a pretty amazing expression of faith. So often we think of faith as being delivered from our circumstances, but, but faith is sometimes also accepting the inevitable and knowing that God somehow is going to weave this in for good. And so that's one of the stories that really sticks in my mind about really how to see the unseen and have faith in the midst of something just really horrific.
We're all about being real around here. And if I'm being truthful, I hate shopping for insurance. So recently, I found a company that made my life much easier and also helped me find an insurance policy. And they help you find all different types of insurances. So what was it? I'm glad you asked. PolicyGenius.com. So I went on Policy Genius, got a quote. It literally took just a couple of minutes. And I got to tell you, to be honest, I was extremely impressed with the representative that I had. They actually text me, followed up with phone calls. They made the process really easy, really impressive, and it all said and done, absolutely, I got insurance through them because they made the process easy, and I liked dealing with them. So that being said, why don't you go on there right now and compare and buy either life insurance, different types of insurance you're looking for. Get on PolicyGenius.com and see what they can do for you. I do recommend them and personally use them. I'm curious, that story and maybe others like it, how has that impacted your faith?
It's hard to process. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I started writing. Mm-hmm. I'm having all these changes in my life, and a lot of people journal. In fact, journaling has been shown to be healthy for people. But, it does impact your faith. And, sometimes you just, like you said, we wonder why. And, Job asked God, 16 or 17 times, why, God? Why does this happen? God never answered him. And, and we're always going to have this on this side of eternity. We're never going to know the meaning of suffering. And I guess that's the thing. It's really about a relationship. It's really about, having that anchor for the soul, that depth of faith that, come what may, God still got us,
Yep.
And, but it's been good to see that in the lives of other people.
What have been some of your feedback as far as like testimonials and stuff? I love testimonies, like even with my book and stuff. I love hearing them because you wrote it obviously to impact people's lives, and I'm sure you have. What are some of the testimonials you've gotten from that?
Well, one of my first books was my friend who's a orthopedic surgeon there in Amarillo, and I sent him a copy of the book, and it really blessed him. I think he's given them out in his office. So there in Amarillo. But it's funny. It's like when I go to book signings and stuff, people cry. They tell me their stories. It's sometimes it's really kind of it's kind of edgy, but it connects with people in a deep way. And that's what the stories are about. My prayer is that somewhere in this book, you're going to find yourself and connect with one of these stories in a real way that's going to, impact your life. So, I'm getting all kinds of great response with it. If you're not really sick and suffering, it's one of those books that, it may not be for you, but everybody knows somebody in their family or whatever who needs to be encouraged. And sometimes we just don't know what to say to folks, who are going through some tough times. And sometimes we give the pat answers and, but this is a good thing for people. It's a good resource for people, to know what to give to somebody, when they don't know what to say. But I've gotten some good responses. It's one of those things. I think it's going to be a slow book to catch on. I want to do a series. I want to do a series on not only a spoonful of courage for the sick and suffering, but the caregivers. The caregivers are kind of a forgotten people group. Yeah. And they're the ones that suffer just as much as the sick person. Their whole life changes, the responsibilities changes, and all the attention is usually on the sick person. And so their whole life is displaced, and it's all changed by this disease. And they're probably even more affected than the sick person. So, how do you encourage those people? So, I've got hopefully if it does well, I'll have a whole series of books.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. It's funny you said that. I'm about to do a work for a client that their spouse unexpectedly passed away, and it literally just obviously rocked the world. They have he was older, but they have kids, and we have to do some work on their house and stuff. And I just saw the chaos. A lot of times it sounds really sad for the person who dies, but he went to go be with the Lord. And he's good. I'm like, to me, in my mind, he's like, he's checked out, he's gone. Thank you, Jesus. But it's those that are, like you said, that are left behind that got to deal with the sadness and them not being there and all those things. And I think, that's the hard part. That's the part that makes me sad, not the person who's passed, if they're with the Lord. So I'm looking forward to that for you.
Yeah. So, and grieving is, man, it's huge, So we all grieve in different ways. It's hard to sometimes, it's just to give people space to, we think they should be over it, and it's amazing how these people can have, flashbacks. Being in a small town, I've had people, I went to basketball games with my kids and seen people, who, we had a kid die, in a car wreck, whatever. And man, it's just like all of a sudden a flashback so it's grieving is a process, man. It's tough.
I'm curious. I've never thought about that. Is that hard for you in the sense being in a small town? Because you see these people, so you see spouses and parents and stuff like that.
I do.
So you have, okay.
I've had people though that smile at me and say, "Hey, Doc, I hadn't seen you in 10 years." It's like, this kind of gives you a complex, it's like, hey, they're happy they haven't seen me,
Yeah. Seriously.
But it is good. It is, when things are good, they're really good. And when things are bad, they're really bad, that's my calling, and pastors have the same thing,
Yeah, very true.
Pastors and all of us do. We have sometimes these situations with people that, things are just never the same.
Yeah.
But you got to put that in God's hands and know that, hey, God's got this, and you just got to move on.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm curious. I joked around about the beginning of the show, and I said you've been nicknamed the best guy to see on the worst day of your life. How did you get that title? Because I don't think we talked about that.
Well, John, I'm a guy you never want to see. I mean, I don't meet people. I don't go to many functions, and when I do, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm kind of socially inept. So how was your day, Dr. Page? Well, I didn't kill anybody today, drained pus and took out a cancer, people just kind of run off when I start talking about that kind of stuff, so, I'm the guy that, kind of like, maybe like the center on the football team. You never know they're there until something bad happens,
And you're glad you had them?
Yeah, you're glad you had them. So that's what I tell people and try to describe to them what I do, So.
Okay. So a couple of personal questions. What do you feel like your biggest strength is in what you do?
Listening, encouraging people.
That's good.
As a doctor, it's funny. The things that we learned in medical school are still true. 90% of our diagnoses are based upon what people tell us. And if we just listen, we don't need a CAT scan. We don't need a bunch of fancy tests. If we just listen to people, they will tell us what's wrong with us. And so if we stop and we listen, and it's so challenging in this technological world, we want to get the CAT scan first or whatever, or, click buttons on the computer screen. But if we listen to people, they'll tell us what's wrong with us. And so I've learned to listen to people. And, that's the benefit of that is I've learned to listen to their stories too.
Yeah. So,
of course, as a general surgeon, it's always hard work. It's just showing up. 90% of my job is just being there, because it's always at 2:00 in the morning, something bad happens. So anyway, yeah. So anyway.
Is our parents told us nothing good happens after 12?
Yes. That's what I tell my kids. Yep. Don't ever go out after midnight. I tell them, don't ever ride an ATV, a horse, or a motorcycle, Yeah.
Nothing good happens. So, okay. I'm curious. Okay. So one of the questions I ask within your strength, do you have a weakness or do you have something else that's a weakness? But sometimes I say that you can have an overextension of your strength can be a weakness, but I don't know if that's.
Oh yeah. Impatience and anger. I deal with impatience and anger. Somebody said, Dr. Page, you're going to put on your tombstone, is the next patient in the room yet? I'm very efficient with my time and I want to get things done. And so, but I am learning patience and, and in my book, some of the things that I bring out and like, this is my own therapy. Okay. But, yeah. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit. It's a gift of God that we can draw on. We don't have to pray for patience because God's already given it to us. And I need to remind myself of that. God's already given us patience. We can pray, God, help me to access the patience you've already given me, but it is a fruit of the Spirit. And so, I'm just on the way like everybody else. I'm still, in that process of being chiseled away and growing and maturing in my faith. And man, it's a process. There's so many things now that make me impatient, especially with medicine. Medicine, you've been practicing medicine for 25 years, probably like your construction work. It's pretty easy. What needs to be done. It's just all the paperwork and all the things, all the obstructions that get in the way, and, I'm just trying to help my patients and get done, and the whole system now is against that.
Complicated. Okay. A couple more questions, but one thing I want to ask you, what's the biggest thing that God's stirring inside of you right now that you're excited about?
The biggest thing that is stirring around in me right now. I'm just learning to wait on God. Just learning to, like I said, that has to do with the patience.
Patience, yeah.
You're just learning to wait. And a funny story. Let me tell you, I got to tell you this story.
Okay.
So, and I don't mean to divert from this, but, every town's got a Walmart. So we had this guy that came in and, he wasn't the brightest guy. And he came in and he needed a bowel surgery. So I did this surgery on him and, cut out his intestines, sewed it back together. And he did pretty good. After surgery, his mom, I knew I was in trouble because his mom said, hey, doc, you need to get him back on his medicines.
Oh, God.
When you've had a bowel surgery, you can't do that. So usually, people with bowel surgery like this, you're in the hospital about a week. So about 2:00 in the morning that evening, the hospital administrator gave me a call. He said, Dr. Page, we've got a problem. We can't find your patient. So my patient, this guy's name's Wally. So this guy's name's Wally. He took his pole and he left the hospital and he walked across the street and walked over to Walmart. And the police, the police started, he had put on a brand new pair of orange shoes and bought a bunch of soda pop. He had a tube coming out of his nose and a gown and his rear sticking out. You can imagine the commotion that started in small town Walmart here in Texas. But anyway, the point is the guy, nobody wants to nobody wants to endure suffering. Everybody wants to exit and escape and get out of it, and I guess that's the thing I'm learning with the changes that we're experiencing is that, God's got me here for a purpose. And I need to learn to be patient in that. And I need to learn to endure. It talks about in Hebrews how the one thing we're lacking is patience, and I mean, how often, I think that's the hardest thing for us as Christians, waiting. I talk about, the acronym waiting is I can't remember it now, but anyway, I'm not that certain. Said I've never made a mistake, but I got a short memory. But just waiting, just stopping and anticipating what God's going to do and working on our relationship with God and waiting for His timing. All those things that we need to do to grow. And so often I think we get ahead of God and we just mess things up, kind of like Wally did that evening.
Yeah.
Caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people. So I'm learning to wait.
Okay, that's good. That's a great. You know what? I just real quick, I want to say I think people that are real driven, that have a real drive or passion for what they do, and whether it's business stuff, that's a really hard one, and I struggle with it. Some days I've gotten a lot better. Today I did terrible. So,
well, that's good. Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, let's say I've been getting a lot better, but today was absolutely terrible. I had zero patience, and I think I almost punched my computer. So that's okay. As we wrap up the show, I do want to ask you if you could go back to the younger you, Chuck. What age would you pick? What advice would you give yourself, knowing you're not going to change anything in the future, but just kind of give yourself a pep talk?
I think it would have been probably at age 30 when I just got out of residency. I had this vision that, getting out of training, I just kind of entered the promised land, but I wasn't really preparing myself for the marathon that this was going to be. Wow. Surgery, when I was a younger guy, surgery was a lot of fun. Getting up at 2 a.m. and, seeing people shot and stabbed in the heart and all this crazy stuff is fun. As you get older, that begins to drain you, and it's a real marathon, and I just didn't realize, just the endurance that I was going to need to finish this thing well.
That's good.
And I think that's true, especially all of us as men, especially in middle age. We kind of get in the doldrums and we kind of keep thinking about, what if I could have did this or did that? And, we realize that, at least for me, this is what God's called me to do. And I need to do it until He tells me to stop.
Yeah.
So anyway, and so that's where I'm at, just learning to, like I said, to wait and to be faithful and just keep going.
That's good, man. I
feel like so many of us, just like, Abraham and Isaac, they're, the tipping point. Abraham, man, he didn't realize it, but man, I mean, can you imagine his emotions as he was going up that mountain, thinking about what he was going to have to do to his son? And, God had already provided the ram for him. It was already there. It was already provided. That was the Jehovah Jireh, it was all there. He didn't know it. And so, but what if Moses would have quit and wouldn't have kept going up that mountain? And that's what I keep reminding myself is I've got to keep going. I've got a lot of people, on my shoulders that I have to carry, Anyway, but it's good. It's a good gig.
Yeah. Well, we'll be praying strength and all that stuff for you. Okay. So how do we want you to come to our church. We want you to speak. We want to check out your book. We want to order lots of copies to hand out to people at the hospital. Hint, hint. I'm giving my audience ideas. How do we connect with you? How do we find your stuff?
CharlesWPage.com, or you can look up a spoonfulofcourage.com. So I'm also starting a podcast. I'm kind of a newbie to this, and it's called Dr. Page's Podcast. And I really just want to hear people's stories of faith and how their faith has impacted their health challenges. In fact, one of the things I've worked on is a surviving sickness and suffering toolkit. And this is it's kind of a video journal, and I'll give you the link, but it's a free kind of deal. And, it's like a 5-minute video that you can just write down the questions if you want to. Okay. And it kind of helps to help you just navigate through, all the feelings that you experience when you're going through a health crisis. And so, if you can maybe, click on that link, I think that would be something that would be real beneficial for you as well, and something that might, help you to change your focus.
Man, that's really good. Yeah. Let us know about that. Send it over. If you want to send that over to us on email, we'll post it in our show notes for our listeners. And again, listeners, remember Spoonful of Courage. You can check that out. So, Chuck, I appreciate your time, man. I love your stories. Love what you're doing. I thank you that you've taken the time. I just see that special, that gift that you have for obviously taking your job serious, but really going above and beyond to help your patients even more, dealing with the emotional side of it, not just the physical side. So I think that's awesome.
Well, thanks, John. It's been great being on the show. It's good talk.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hold on just a second. Roar Nation, I hope you guys check out that book. I'm sure you guys know somebody who could use some encouragement. So remember, Spoonful of Courage. Order a couple books. I was thinking about myself. I'd love to make a hospital visit, and even a chance to just minister to people or hand out books or say, hey, I want to pray for you, and I have this book. Because a lot of times people are in the hospital by themselves, or they don't have loved ones. I've just had to go through this ourselves as a family with people in the hospital. So just encourage you a way to do some ministry or reach out to those who could use some encouragement. So Roar Nation, if you need anything, remember, reach out to us. Check us out on Facebook, our Are You Real page. And you can also check us out on Instagram or email. So remember, be real, be authentic, and be you. God bless.
That's all for this episode of Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You. Be sure to go to areyoureal.org for your free questionnaire to identify your gifts and talents and how you can use them to help people become leaders and catapult them into their destiny to help others become the leaders of tomorrow. We appreciate you spending your time with us and look forward to helping you reach out and revolutionize next time on Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You.